Hey, that's our cue. 7 o'clock, let's start this work session here. Here. I'm gonna excuse Blair. Fortunately, got a phone call said he's in the emergency room, so hopefully all's well with him. Maybe, yeah, just kind of keep him there. Thoughts, okay? So we're here for the bond discussion, right? So we had that presentation last month. Jenny's just gonna essentially walk us through all this and help us. We don't have decisions to make tonight, but if we could come to some conclusions so we can bring it back to city council. Okay. Are you prepared yet? I mean, I know you're prepared. Are you?
I kind of like this more casual environment myself. It's a lot less pressure than our old meetings. But first off, I'd like to introduce our new staff member, Brody Flint, for all you council members. It's our legal team. We call him legal team. He'll be filling in for our city attorney responsibilities, and he's also prosecuting in our justice court for us. So we would like to welcome him. It looks like our engineer is joining us as well to work on that tonight. Okay. So I just prepared a brief overview based on all of you received the bond presentation from Zions Bank that we received in March. And I've just put some of the key items that maybe are the more important things for your discussion and assessment to make this decision. So Matt Robertson's office, and he put together the entire complex, kind of a cost estimate for each of the items. So this is broken out between City Hall, the police station, the rec center, the public works facility, and the parks facilities as far as the pickleball courts and basketball courts go, and landscaping and the site work and utilities, with that grand total that we submitted to Zions Bank. So again, the intent with putting all of it out there was to see where the city's assessment would come back as far as funding goes. But we had some assets set aside that we'll go through really quickly. And so the initial intent was with the sale of the public works building over on Washington Boulevard and on our 36-month, almost year, month lease. These are the items, and Justin can chime in as well, that we kind of pinpointed the money that we were going to be using for this project. So we had assessed 33% of the Class C road funds. That's the total road funds here. So the 33% is this figure, 33% of sewer funds for this figure, and 33% of the stormwater funds for this figure, with a total for the utility fund money that we set aside. We also have the sale of the public works building. We set aside $650,000 of our ARPA funds that can go for infrastructure and other related things. And this is a guess for the sale of the 700 North property, where that would almost be on the high end, we're guessing, because we're really only getting those lots paper ready for a development there. But we're kind of just guessing that we would get that amount of money out of the sale. So the two utility fund revenue and the sale of the assets and ARPA funding would be around a little over $2.5 million. So if you go back to the first slide, you can see the public works facility was actually $3.5 million. So there would be $1 million shortage for that. But what our thought was is that we would develop what we could, and the rest would be phased in at a later date using impact fees or things like that. But then we kind of changed courses a little bit in the middle of this and decided maybe it would be best to do the entire complex. We are kind of, I think all of you are aware of our tight squeeze here at City Hall with the hiring of a new city recorder. Brody's been so generous to share the mayor's been generous to let Brody share her office so that we can meet our needs and have court and do all the other things that we need to do to keep going in the city. So the need is definitely here. So with the discussion of the bonding options, the excise tax, this is direct from his assessment last month. The total proceeds would generate about $10.5 million through pledging the sales tax revenue and franchise tax. The utility revenue, honestly, I'll be a little hesitant to pledge that if, depending on what you decide to do. I wouldn't want to pledge the utility revenue if we wanted to utilize any of that in the first assessment that we did. If we wanted to go down the road as far as we could with the public works facility under the initial projections, then I would be hesitant to say that we were going to bond for any of our utility revenue. If we wanted to go through the whole project full force and bond, then that would be an option to utilize those. So there's another, the other general obligation bonds. And if you remember from the slides, and we can go through those slides if you'd like, but the general obligation bonds are the only bonding mechanism that required an election. And in talking to the financial advisor, even as recently as this morning, there's not really a recommendation to bond for anything that you have to do in your project. It would only be available to do optional items. We wouldn't want to bond for the public works building because in a general obligation bond, because we're pretty much on a 36-month lease to get that relocated. Is that clear enough there? So general obligation bonds would be recommended to do the entire city project, but the option exists for you to decide to do a variety of bonding for the different elements of the project. So with the general obligation bonds, there was a clear through the 4% for general purposes option. We're clearly under what our total capacity is with our project, even at the 17 million, not that we intend to do that. So staff has been thinking and talking quite a bit about these bonding options, and my personal recommendation is to use a combination of bonding and maybe do what the recommended general obligation bond for the recreation center or the parks facility items, but to use excise tax if you don't want to use the utility revenue for the city hall, the police department, all those other elements, and to kind of just throw it out there for other discussion that you'd like, or what your thoughts are about the bonding options and how you feel about it.
We haven't talked about the sale of this building either. No, so
Yeah.
that would be
I wondered about that.
included in something. And I'm not so sure about the two pieces of property, or I don't know if it's the one parcel on 700. I'm wondering if 200,000 isn't low.
That corner piece by the, yeah.
So, and again, these are just rough numbers, right? The reason we put those numbers together right now, the Warren Hollow subdivision, the lots sold, and our lots are a little bit bigger, but they're in a completely improved subdivision. The lot sold for about $170,000 a lot. That was completely finished. Now, while we're selling the lots that people still have to come in, pay all the fees to connect to the sewer, the water, you know, a developer's gonna wanna, again, in this market, we don't know it, because it could get into a bidding war and all of a sudden the lots are 150, 200,000, you know, thousand per lot. I don't know. So that's where we're just kind of trying to cautiously be optimistic that say, hey, maybe our numbers are a little low here. Also, we didn't put in there any of the existing impact fee money that we have through our capital facilities plans. That's roughly another almost million between transportation, stormwater, and again, sewer right now, we can't do anything with because there is no money for sewer. But we can take a little bit extra out of the sewer cash on hand and use some of that money and then reimburse it later with impact fee money. So there are still a few options. It's still, you know, we're just trying to figure out which way is the best way to move forward, because we know we're on a stricter timeline with the Public Works building, but we'd also love to just do the entirety of the project at once.
So you talked about this building here. Do we have any need for this for city? First of all, before we say. So,
You come in here and we have to fumigate it because there's sewer, there's stuff.
There's quite a few drainage issues with the sewer. There's, you know, the possibility that this building could, with the new updated FEMA flood maps, fall into the floodplain, and then we have to cover flood insurance, especially where our basement sits lower than the pond out of the park. There's there's been venting issues. The evidence room isn't vented out properly, so it vents through the entire city hall.
That's why everyone's happy.
Yeah. So there's just a lot of issues with this building that I don't know that's.
Probably demo, but once again, that's part of,
Renovated.
as part of the detail renovation.
And this is a very much a prime commercial piece. You know, you ride on a four-way stop with the stoplight off of 89. So, I mean, you could imagine that this, if we did the process of, I don't know if it's on the future land use of being rezoned as commercial, but it is commercial.
It's on our future land.
Yeah. I see it on the future. So, I mean, we rezone it prior to sell as commercial and we have a lot better chance of selling this property.
This building's what, 30 plus years old, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it flooded the first time, it's not 88. So it served its purpose.
Sorry, can I just say one more?
We're very open to
Oh,
tonight,
yeah.
so.
Apologize, jumping in here.
Jump up and down all you want.
Okay, I just wanted to point out one thing. First of all, I think the discussion is great. One thing I just want everyone to think about, when you get into conversations, obviously this is a broad conversation, but when we get into a more detailed conversation about selling any type of real estate that the city owns, I think it's really important to be very generic right here, because you can enter a closed session to talk about real estate transactions. So maybe just keep that in mind a little bit. I don't know that we want to throw out numbers or shoot ourselves in the foot making comments in open meeting that someone could read later. So just as you talk about these things, if we need to, we could just notice up and do a closed meeting to talk more like, hey, we need to sell this number for X number of dollars, not this. Let's just kind of keep that in mind. But the last thing we want to do is throw a number out there that somebody gets to use on us later. So just have that in mind as we have that discussion, because that is one of the very specific things you can have a closed meeting about is real estate. So
Great, you can interrupt us with that kind of information.
Yeah.
So going back to the 17th, is that hard numbers?
So that's the engineer's cost estimate that he went through, and here it is in detail. So he outlines the project cost summary. This is just projected costs. Obviously that is based on projections that can change. I mean, in my own experience building a house, by the time we were able to order our lumber within 2 weeks, the prices were increased 7%. You just don't know exactly how much it's going to cost, but this is the engineer's cost estimate that we would go off of for our financing. Just like would do in a regular loan process. But it is in more detail here of what is broken out for what was considered. Is that helpful?
So what's the 10% contingency? Is that just like a built-in buffer? That is? Yes.
Right.
Just in case.
Well, you've heard recently, it's been in the news that even Tooele, I think it was Tooele City or County bonded, and by the time they got around to building it, they didn't have enough funding.
Yeah, it's the high school,
The high school, they ran out.
55 million they ran out.
Yeah. But, I just wondered, because I just thought that's what that was. Just thanks for the clarification.
And then the park facilities and landscaping. These are the assessments of the costs of those. And Justin pointed out that we did not include any of the impact fees that are available. I do have that, the totals of the impact fees that Jessica provided for us. These we would recommend you use to make the bond payments. So we wouldn't cash these out necessarily to put and pay on the project, but we would use the money in here to pay the bond payment. And those will be increasing with the adoption of the new sewer impact fee that is enacted in 90 days and the stormwater is adjusted. And we're working on updating the parks, transportation and public safety impact fees as well. So the anticipated growth that the city is experiencing, we're just looking at making payments with those impact fees, but not cashing those out for the project. There are some available in stormwater funds and those others that need to be spent. And so we'll make good use of those as quickly as possible. And it is included in the facilities plans for the impact fees, the 750 West complex.
And just to add to that, you can use the impact fees to preempt before you bond. So if we wanted to start site work while you're going through the bonding process or the budget process or impact fee studies, you can use those fees to start the project. This makes me nervous and excited at the same time. It's a lot of money, but I think we've been a long time. Hopefully we put it out for a long time.
So
And we
what-
got promise.
What's the total of those? I'm guessing they're the impact fees, transportation, class C, the bottom column.
Yeah, you can't use all of them. The only ones you'd be able to use would be the stormwater and sewer and transportation.
So when I can't read the numbers, I see 795, it's like on stormwater.
It's 150, 045, 56.
No, so about $800,000 or $900,000. So we could use that 900,000 to start things.
For site work. Wouldn't that be engineering?
So we're gonna have roughly 3 million at our use, for our use.
2.5 if we go off of what we had assessed to relocate the public works building before we even started talking about bonding.
Yeah.
And obviously we were prioritizing what was necessary for them to relocate. And then we were looking towards using future impact fees or things like that to add different phases to that. So that's still an option. It's also an option to not do it that way and to bond for the entirety of the complex. That's really what tonight's about. It's listed as a work session, so there won't be a final decision made, but the opportunity to just discuss it and talk about the future needs of the city and how we anticipate, because we're making a decision now that will affect the next people that come in.
So
Really,
if we went the bonding route, put it to a vote, how much per household would that cost the average Harrisville citizen per year?
So that is included in the mouse. In the presentation total. So is that clear enough there for you to see on your screen? So for the annual impact for $100,000 home, this is but specifically max for the, excuse me, Councilmember Jackson, for the $5 million that it would cost to do the recreation and community center and then the parks facilities. That's all that was assessed here. He didn't do a general obligation bond for the 17 million. He does not recommend that
At all,
at all. Because
for obvious reasons.
yes, he did not recommend any general obligation bond for anything that we have to do. Because what happens is, yes, what happens is you put it out on a bond and then they vote against it and then you have to build it anyway. So the impact on an annual home of $100,000. So if it's a $400,000 home, it would be 4 times the 33.98. The annual impact on a $100,000 business would be 61.78. And again, that would be dependent on how much the value of their business or their home is.
Is that based on market value or on that assessed value? Like assessed value, like for the county recorder, county or whatever, yeah, assessor, yeah. Okay.
So essentially what we're doing is looking at the cost and then looking at our sources of income to cover the cost and how we want to make that look, right?
That's a per year cost?
Yes, the annual, I highlighted
Right,
the annual cost.
Okay, all right. So you're talking like $10 a month on a $400,000 house.
Yeah, about 20, because it'd be 400,000. Oh, no, I'm sorry, yes.
Not if you go out county tax, right?
Right.
That's what.
Yeah,
It'd be $14 a month on $400,000.
yeah, I mean, that's just, how long do these bonds last? What's the,
25 years.
okay. I didn't remember, thank you.
So if
This
it's
is required through taxation.
The
Hearing,
general obligation bonds require an election,
right.
but the excise tax and the utility revenue, that's done by resolution.
Okay.
There is an option to do future property taxes. There was listed on there as well. Jessica, do you have any?
No, I don't have any experience with that now. Yeah, I don't have experience with that. I just have experience with the GO bonds and excise tax bonds.
Which is really what our recommendation would be, is to do the general obligation bond for the rec center, community center. I guess you could pledge that with the excise tax, but that's, 17 million seems like a really large number, but those are all your options. We're just trying to provide you with as much information as we can for you to make the best decision that you can.
So if we bonded for 25 years, that's to pay for, what did you just say that would help us pay for?
So if we bonded for 25 years, the recommendation would be to pledge excise tax, the sales tax and franchise tax to build the city hall, the police station, the public works facility, and the site work and utilities here.
So these are the recreation and the parks.
And we could put on a general obligation bond for the recreation community center and the parks facilities landscape. That's kind of what Science Bank's representative was explaining. Obviously, we can do it differently. We do qualify to do a general obligation bond for the total amount, because we could get up to 33 million, which we don't need for the entire project. But that, again, means that you would put it on the ballot for, and it wouldn't be the $14 a month, because that was at 5 million, not 17 million.
Right. That's when we said if they shoot it down, then we're stuck.
Well, we still have to go forward with this, and then we
So then you
kind of go back
pledge
to this.
Yeah.
It's just better
Just start.
politically and publicity to do it properly the first time.
Right. Makes sense.
Well, and then maybe we could get creative in the meantime. We could go for some of these grants that we're not accessing now for the recreation or things that we haven't been up for before. We can do a whole community center.
We can put the community center, if we build a new senior center, it would qualify for a CDBG grant. A portion of it, you can receive up to $400,000 2-year increments of $200,000 for a CDBG grant. You can also apply for ramp grants, the large project plan ramp grants, possibly combining several grants to try to.
They're not millions of dollars each, but they add up,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
We take the obligation off.
Any way of paying this operating?
That we got mixed. It depends on what type of bond we.
If you do the callable bonds, yes. If you don't, then no.
What's it called?
That the investors are willing to forego the interest for you to pay it off early.
Oh, okay.
Is that maybe a higher interest rate in the first place?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
So,
They're not gonna go with it.
Then are there penalties involved if you do that?
No, if they're callable, no.
Okay. They just charge you more upfront.
like, do we have any idea, you know, 0.5%, or is it like 5%? Is it drastic? Do we know?
I don't know that figure.
I guess that would be whether you want to take that down or not, right? How much money we're talking about when we do that.
You have to look at it as a cash flow perspective. So you don't want to say, I'm going to issue TO bonds and I'm going to pay off early, and yet my cash flow suffers. So if you want to even out your payments, does that make sense? So it doesn't benefit the city to pay them off early. It's better to span them out, be consistent with your cash. Have your rainy day funds.
So what we're, let's see, so what is our population based on what we have now? 6,000.
We're at 7.
And we're hedging our bets that we will double. So.
But we got some figures last time, 800 homes. What period of time was that in? I forgot.
Those were proposed connections in the
Yeah.
next 5 years.
So that was very much in the 5 years through the impact fee study. Projected numbers again, because what we're seeing in the development, we're seeing, you know, Ben Lomond's almost 700 homes. The Washington Boulevard, Dixon Creek Park is another almost 250 homes. That's not including all the commercial development plus other developments that are going on. I think that number was kind of undervalued. I would drastically say probably 1,000 would be a more accurate ERU total in the next 5 years.
So that's potentially putting down the share of every household. Of the share of the cost.
Would be spread across those.
Yes.
And yet the new people that are moving in would participate in the new building, right? The new-
And they wouldn't, again, when you go buy a new house, you don't look at the taxes, you don't look at the utilities, a lot of people prior to doing that, right? I mean, so that's already.
This is the cost.
This is the cost, they're used to it, so it's better to probably try to do something up front now. Where we're having a whole new city, per se,
That's right.
come in. I mean, if we double in city, we're a whole new city, right?
That's right.
Okay, it's better to have them not be like, oh, now we built and 6 months down the road, now you're gonna pay more taxes or hire this or hire that. Right now, if we do it, then it's already, they're like, oh, that's just what it is.
So if we do the recreation and parks and everything, it would probably come up in November.
Yes, and he was supposed to send me, let me stop sharing here for a moment. He was supposed to send me an email that gave the timelines of when we would have to give notice if we intended to do a general obligation bond. But it doesn't, he was at a conference, it doesn't look like he sent that to me, so he will get those for us as far as when when it would become available, or the noticing would have to be met to meet this year's. Otherwise, if we miss the deadline, it's in June. He did mention it's in June. If we miss the deadline, then we have to wait another year. But again, that would be a portion of what we're trying to do.
So even if we miss that deadline, there's other things that we could do in between and still make progress.
Yes, but there's a bit of a rip the Band-Aid off mode too. I mean, how many times do we want to, we don't have to tell the public how often we're increasing rates. When we're doing the budget right now, we're assessing our garbage fund and all of the utility rates. And there are areas that the city's been suffering that we want to correct. And those costs get passed on to those people that use those, right?
And we talked about the, what was it, maintaining tax base.
Certified tax rate.
Certified tax base. That's bigger into this too. That, we know that some of those things can exist. Well, at least maintain. So that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. And this falls on you guys. It does. I mean, it's coming down to, you guys have to make this decision. I think Jenny, I think everyone is willing to help in determining this, but it essentially falls on the council to make this decision. And it's a big one.
I think it's a yearly thing we need to do to keep it the same.
We
Well,
do it-
certified
we
tax
do it
rate
in
is
Northview, certified
every
tax,
year.
Yeah, every
Yes.
year.
Yeah.
Once people get used to it, it's not going to be a big torch pitchfork thing.
Well, if we look at the history of what we've done here in Harrisville, we did a property tax increase in 2013, and it was difficult for our residents. And it is easier to take a little bit of a bite out of their budget every year than to double it, say. I mean, even though we aren't doubling the taxes they pay, everyone misunderstands that rate, and they think that their entire property tax is doubling. And so to me, the less you have to do that, the better off it is for the city if it's a huge chunk. If you're just incrementally doing it, it's easier to absorb. It's never fun to pay more, but as we're experiencing right now.
The only thing I'm wrestling in my mind to make sure that we cover, I call it the everyday incidents, the things that are in the budget, the replacement of cars, equipment. As the city expands, we've got to have that money to build a bigger infrastructure. And make sure we cover that as well as what we're doing here. I think this is great. I understand the concepts, but my concern is, are we going to be able to write the checks day to day as we continue to bring in all these other homes? Does that make sense?
I think, Jessica, is that what you addressed earlier?
Yes,
So reiterate that for us.
yes, the cash flow, we just want to maintain
That's what it is.
consistence and have a rainy day fund.
But we have to have the right.
Absolutely.
And our impact fees are gonna go up because of all the new developments.
Impact fees we anticipate will go up, yes, because of the developments that are coming in. And impact fees have regulations on how you can spend them. You can't pay for everything out of impact fees. They have specific rules and regulations, and that's what the facilities plan is to anticipate. But as we experienced last time we adopted the impact fees, things change in the 5 years, and you see development come in that you weren't anticipating or that you didn't know. All we can do is do our best to anticipate what changes are going to happen in the city. I use this example with the floodplain in some areas that we've just classified them as vulnerable because of the floodplain, right? In years past, we would explain on the phone to some developer that the majority of a parcel was in a floodplain and they'd walk away. But now the price of property has inflated so drastically that it's worth their money to try to go to the Army Corps of Engineers with wetlands or to FEMA for floodplain and mitigate those floodplains. And we're experiencing that in our two major mixed-use developments right now, with Benlow Golf Course and also Dixon Creek Park over on Washington Boulevard, and potentially a third, not mixed-use development, but a cluster development in the other, off of North Harrisville Road, where they're not even potentially changing the zoning, but they're donating 17 acres to the city for a park over there as well because of the floodplain. So it's completely changed development on the city's planning side. Areas that we didn't think would be developed are now being considered by developers because it's more affordable that they can sell. Yeah, it's worth it. It's worth the money they're investing in it. They're going to recoup that.
Start raining.
Well, isn't that we heard that at the public hearings, planning commission, that they're concerned about development because of where the water is going to go. But then on the other hand, do we have enough water to provide those services? And there's always that balance.
My opinion is I don't mind putting the two up on public and the rest starting and getting it done. And hopefully we can convince them that the other two are going to be worth, the little bite that you're going to get, because it's all things that everybody in the city can use. And so.
I think everyone's attracted to a city or where you want to live because of the amenities. I mean, you might like your house, but you want to have some things around you that contribute to your quality of life, right? So if we can have those things around us, we have parks, we have those recreation.
So let me ask you this. And I don't know if we know anybody, I don't know, but have you ever seen the pickleball courts up by in Pleasant View, by the park? They found somebody to do it. And they put their name on the gate, who cares? I mean,
A donation?
somebody built the whole thing and then they put their name on the gate, big deal. I mean, we could look for things like that to mitigate some of the costs of things like that. Yeah, I mean, because right now that's one of the most popular sports in the whole country. And if we could maybe look at things like that, to the ramp tax and those things to help offset some of the costs, then that maybe would help,
I think that's how we got our disc golf. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Someone came in and decided they
They
wanted to,
donate.
yeah, they donated the installation.
so I'm saying, that if we could think of something like that, because I'm sure there's people out there that, don't mind doing something like that. But I personally think we need to do as much as possible, because we just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I have a nephew who sells lumber for a company. I mean, he's selling $8 to $9 million in lumber. And he says it's not going down. He says, I don't care. You can see it. They sell say these things. He says, but right now, there's no end in sight.
So it's not a matter of waiting and seeing if it go down, because that's just not.
He says that the more expensive.
And what you're seeing is that the rates are outpacing your opportunity to save anything. You can't make up for the difference.
Well, and we don't want to end up like the Tooele High School. I mean,
No.
to bond all that and then to come back and have to tell them you're going to eat up another $55 million. I know ours is that big of a project, but just in that year and a half, I think it's 2 years that they started that project, and that's how much it went up in 2 years. So the longer we sit and wait,
It feels like even months, a month or two is too long.
I mean, when you put contingency, $1 million worth of just contingency funds, that tells you something.
And I think that's extremely conservative.
Yeah. Yeah. it's
Likely with what's been happening.
But I think if we could put those two up and then see what we can do tax wise or, grant wise and things like that to see what we can get to put that stuff in to help.
So let me help clarify, just so I understand. You're proposing that we would do a general obligation bond for the recreation community center and the parks facilities.
Mhm.
And then we would do a different type of bond for the city,
I don't want to put the other stuff I don't want to put on.
the ballot.
Yeah, no,
We would do an excise.
because this
Tax or-
part of it needs to be built. Okay, that you need this right now. He needs his right now. His has got to happen. But you need it, okay? This is, I look at it as the Titanic and it's still going, but it's gonna go pretty damn quick. The building is just that old. So we need to do those, the things that we need the most. Yes, I want to just do. The others, we can work around. Try to get those in. And those are things that everybody gets to use, so it might be a little, easier to sell.
I think that's what we've been told in the past, is that people are willing to just spend money on recreation.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that because people don't want large lots, they want to go out and play. They
Yeah.
want to have.
Well, and I think that's the mindset we have to have. Some of the neighbors that we talked about, recreation programs in North Ogden versus what happens in Harrisville. And it's all built around zip codes, which I think is interesting. Needless to say, what are they doing that incorporating cost in that we're not doing? That type of thing then becomes an advertisement saying, we're gonna do this. Like that also, it's a little bit more of a bright shining star for the residents here. The pickleball courts, the tennis courts, or baseball areas, or soccer fields, whatever it may be. It's something that needs to be included with that as a discussion of what's gonna happen with water. Because we know where it's gonna go in 5 years. We have to move that in again, bring it up. Are we gonna sink another $1 million into that, $200,000 or $300,000 just to keep going? But is that something that's a shining star for our city? Right now, every babysitting group loves this.
So there's 2 points that I hear out of that, Grover, as well. That first off, I think our recreation department does an amazing job
Yeah.
balancing our recreation program with very little to do that with, because we don't have a facility to run basketball, but we run a basketball program. We have cut back on the amount of fields that we have available for our baseball softball program because it's in a detention basin. But we run a softball and baseball program. And I think we do an amazing job with balancing what we do have available for our residents and running our programs. And that being said, something else to consider with this growth is we can go out and get our hands, but as you use the splash pad as an example, we can get grant money to put the facility in. We don't use grant money to maintain it or to pay for the employees to support it. And so as we look and assess the needs financially for the city, the property tax is the most stable that we're going to be able to maintain future growth and the resources that and the services that our residents are accustomed to. And so as we go through this process and we build a recreation center and we go and we provide these things for our residents, we need to be able to sustain them. Because this splash pad's a perfect example of that. It's been a challenge to keep that up and running every year. And that opened when I became the recorder in 2012. So you think that's not that, it's 10 years we've had the splash pad, and look how many times we've had to address mechanical issues. Now we're dealing with different issues, drought issues, but we need to look at the reaching arm of how are we gonna
And I
maintain
guess
this?
the thing is we have to not think here. We have to think here, because that's where we will be in 50 years from now.
Yeah.
And that, you know, just, it's not just the building, but it's the recreation things that have got to think outside the box and say, we're gonna expand these teams, we're gonna expand this, what's it gonna cost us to do that? So we make sure that we can anticipate as growth comes. We have the facilities, we have the programs that will continue to help build this as a kind of a center-based community. We want to keep our residents here.
Yeah.
It's fun.
All right. Have you guys? Yeah, anything more that Jenny can present to us?
So there are follow-up items I can bring back to you, answers, questions that we haven't had tonight.
Just clarify for me. So Steve just said do a bond for the rec center and the parks, so that's 2, right? 2 of those line items. Okay, what were the other line items? Public Works, City Hall, can you bring that up?
Police department
Police,
and site.
And sidewalk.
utilities, light work and utilities.
6 of them.
So we have some impact fees that we can expend from stormwater for sure, site work.
And also for sure, there's the ARPA funding. It's very stringent on, it has to be infrastructure based. So the site work, I mean, with 600,000, 650 from the ARPA funding, the 650 that we sold the Public Works building for, and the stormwater impact fees that we are getting really close to a 6-year point, but if we haven't expended those in 6 years, they actually need to be reimbursed as per state law if we haven't earmarked them for this project. So therefore, I mean, we're right there at about 1.2 million. Site work and utilities, I mean, Matt has at 2.5 million. There's some things more or less that we need to kind of change around a little, especially through development, that pond and the irrigation system. We're addressing because it will affect HHI, the commercial development out on the highway will really affect that irrigation system. So there will be some possible costs and cooperations that they'll have to then pay back to the city for us, allowing them to connect onto those. Because it's not just a simple service here or there, it's actual piping all the way into them and through them. And it's,
So that's another clarification point I would look for from you. Would you anticipate using any of this original funding mechanism that we had planned to help with the site work, utility work? Or would you want to just leave our utility funds and then make payments on those bonds from that money? Because those are 2 different options that we have.
Where's the money? Where do we find the money when we use this money?
That's the big
that's
question.
the question.
That's an honest question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see the need for using this money, but at the same time,
Essentially,
you want the upper back.
essentially you're right. I mean, this is the utility fees, the Class C, the sewer and the stormwater fund is essentially money that we take out of cash on hand that we have in those accounts right now. And it's gone. I mean, again, with growth and other opportunities and possibly adjusting the utility fees a little bit, we may get some of that back. But again, it puts us, as far as Public Works, in a kind of precarious situation because honestly, those funds should be at a lot different point Because honestly, we have one major natural disaster and we don't get state or federal help.
Right.
One project's $1 million. Well, they're shot through our sewer fund, you know. They're shot through our stormwater fund, and then we're trying to operate a city on zero money, zero
So we
cash
would-
on hand.
We would still have the ARPA funds.
Yes, the 1.5 would be totally separate. And that is actually money well, at least the ARPA funding and some impact fee money that we don't have up there has to be used for
Okay.
the start of the site work, right? So, but again, and we're being cautious, right? If we go off those numbers, we're able to access and use this money. I would still keep those numbers the same for that buffer of the in case.
Your
Cost.
hedging,
You know, we've got $1 million in contingency fund, but now we have an extra 1.5 million in contingency fund. Now we're at 2.5 million in contingency fund. Does that make sense? Because we used 1.5 of our own money.
How much comes in annually for the Class C road fund? That's from the Fed, right?
Yes, and we just went through it last year. We updated all our roads. We were actually for about 7 years
260,000.
under, we were quite a bit under that.
And as the city expands, those numbers change.
Sure.
As every lane mile goes in, then we update the state and the feds. Again, we didn't put in the transportation tax money that there is a little bit in that, but again, we're just trying to protect the city as much as we don't want to dip into our cash on reserves.
So, but the one
Our
point
rainy
five
day
million,
fund. The 1.5 million has already been earmarked for this project.
so
The 1.5 million, it was already said no, because that's the sale of the public works building and the ARPA funding. We had to, we don't have to use the public works building sell money for this, but that was the main intent, right? That was the goal. And then the ARPA for sure has to go for infrastructure. So if it doesn't get used on this project, then I'm doing a massive sewer lining project and gonna expend those funds through that, because if I don't expend those funds prior to 2024, it goes back to the federal government.
We can keep the roads and not have them torn up, put it on that.
stretch your roads.
I'm all right if you don't want to do.
And actually, ARPA funding cannot be used for roads.
If it's gonna protect us, I mean, like Rover said, I don't wanna see us one day go, oh no, now we're shorthanded here and here. And, just see what we have to bond out on the other, put into it, but.
So one of the options is to use the utility revenue to do the site work and utility work under a utility revenue bond and make the payments from the utility fees and impact fees to make those bond payments, to do an excise tax, a sales tax bond for the actual municipal complex, the police department, and the so we could, City Hall, the police station, and the public works facility, we could do an excise tax. We could do a sales tax bond for those 3 items. We could do a utility bond for the site work and utilities that would just cover the cost that we don't have the cash up front. We have the $1.5 million up front, and we could pledge those utility fees for the remaining. And then we could do a general obligation bond for recreation, community center, and the parks, facilities, and landscaping. We could try to get grant money for those things, and we could come back with, at least by the May meeting, I would have a date that we would have to notify them if we intended to do the general obligation bond this year.
You go back one slide.
Sure.
Before this.
This
Yeah,
one?
that one, yeah. So we're looking at using the excise tax bond. Is that what you're saying, Jenny, that
Yeah.
to do public works?
Yeah, the
City Hall
police
and the
and
police
city.
department.
Okay,
So we're looking at actually 3 bonding options, right?
okay.
And then the utility bonds, but you kind of hesitated that one when we first started this meeting.
So I did in the beginning of the meeting, if we're going to pledge, or if we're gonna use the existing assets. We don't wanna do both. We wouldn't have enough money to do both. But under this, if you intended to do this half, we would not want to pledge any of our utility funds. If we don't intend to do this, that cash stays in those utility accounts.
Then
We could
do the
use that
utility.
money to pay the bond payment, correct, Jessica?
Yes.
You
Use
could
this
use that
money?
money to
So
pay,
you're not
this
planning to
money.
do that?
Well, it will grow as we're making the bond.
Yeah.
too.
Okay, that's fine, that's what makes
Now go
sense.
back
yeah,
to-
we're not depleting it without an opportunity for it to replenish.
Correct.
We're not depleting any of these accounts without the opportunity for them to be
And
replenished.
these two options, we just do as resolution, or how do we do that?
Yes,
Okay,
the
What's
only
that?
one that would require the general obligation bond is the
we
recreation
still have to
center.
hold a public hearing on
We do, yes.
Okay, what was that other bond, excise tax bond, and what's the other, utility, something out of it?
What does that do to the total amount?
Utility
that goes out
revenue
for
bond.
Payments
it. Yeah,
to households.
but if we don't use the.
Well,
We do a utility, we do an excise, we
Right.
do a general.
We would use, so if we don't use the 33% things,
Mhm.
we do the utility bonds, that would do our, help with our site work. correct?
Yes.
Okay,
That would cover everything.
So that would cover all the side.
If we get into all this,
I wish we got another.
our goals with our
that we have.
personnel, step and grades and everything else, but are we gonna be able to maintain our goal to
That's
stay
separate.
competitive with our salaries and wages?
That would be with your sales tax.
What's that?
That would be with your sales tax and property tax.
Property tax.
And I personally.
So Max, that is where it gets tricky with the growth that we've been
Right.
looking at. And one of the reasons why we focus so much on these mixed use, bringing in retail and commercial. I can't give you a sneak peek yet, but the golf course is getting really close to the commercial development element of theirs, and it blew me away. I was very pleased to see what they anticipate putting in for their town center, for the golf course. So to your point that, yeah, we need to look at this as a whole as the city grows and make sure that we haven't created a train with no driver, right? We can't continue down this momentum that we've been working so hard to create through that process. But we will also bring on board a lot of other property taxpayers, utility fee players. So I know we've rehashed this, but I just want to be clear on staff sense so we understand. If we go back to the beginning slide, we would pledge sales tax and franchise tax for City Hall, the police station, and the public works facility. We would pledge the utility fee minus the $1.5 million we already have in assets for the site work and utilities. And then we would do a general obligation bond for the recreation community center and the parks facilities and landscape. Is everybody clear on the staff? That's our interpretation. Am I missing anything?
Just that clarification. I would still suggest heavily that we don't buffer that number of site work utility.
No.
We don't
Yes, we pledge for the full,
We
or we
pledge-
ask for the full. amount
ask for
to
the
be
full
spent.
amount of the 2.5.
And that
Still
gives
will-
us- and
we'll
that
use
gives us
our-
some playroom.
We'll use our money first, but there again, that gives us some playroom
Uh-huh.
to then again, those other funds very much are earmarked for just the site work. Where this, even though it says site work and utilities, could then help build another, an outbuilding to store more vehicles or, do the covered carport for the police, so on and so forth.
It fixes your tool.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
So let me,
Doesn't impact us if we're still at like 17 million.
Yes.
That's at today's cost. We know what's gonna happen. We need to look at 20 million.
That's what the contingency is in there.
Is there enough contingency to buffer us to 20 million or 22 million?
Should we have Matt chime in? Matt, we're putting you on the spot. Would you like to chime in on your cost assessment?
Yeah, I'm just catching a little bit here and there. So what was the question exactly? Is it about the contingency?
So we're kind of wondering if the 17.5 from the cost estimate would cover the cost of the inflating cost of building by the time we get this built. Is that enough in the contingency and the projected cost to cover? We don't want to be in the situation where we bonded and don't have enough money to complete our project. So
Yeah, that's a concern. I mean, to be honest, that's a concern I have, is that while trying to be realistic and not blowing everyone away with how much it was, I hope I didn't shoot too low. So that is honestly a concern I'd have, and it's hard to know exactly what inflation's going to do, especially when we look at what's happened over the last year or so. If you want me to do a little more work on it and dig into it a little deeper, I can revisit those costs and make sure we're all comfortable with them.
Well, I would rather go for what we need instead of.
Yeah, we have to pay it back, so.
If we built it today, what would it cost?
Right.
And
17.5.
Yeah, no, that they get back.
that was 2 days ago.
Yeah. Yeah. But we
Right.
need-
Good point.
I would say I would like to see if we need to maybe even look at doing a little bit more to, yes, to just.
If we did more, then we didn't use it all, Jessica, then what happens to the excess?
Then you pay it back.
We pay it back to
Well,
the,
we can use them.
Just depending on what kind of a bond we bought in the first place.
But we can turn around, and let's just say that those 3 buildings come in a little bit low, we have a little bit left over, we can use that on other things in this project.
Yes.
And we don't have to put it on a general. For the meeting of the junior high and the gym.
Right.
Well, and if you look at what Matt did, all of his contingencies were 20 or at 10%.
right,
So just easy math, like if you wanted to build in a 20% contingency fee, you're now at 17, whatever, plus 1.74, so you're at 19, and that gives you a 20% buffer rather than a 10.
yeah.
And that would make me feel comfortable too, but I wouldn't mind seeing that if we build it a bit more.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing that from pretty much general consensus
That's
here.
not really
Matt,
halfway through.
can we just, and thank you, Brody, because I think that's a really easy way for Matt to just double the contingency to give us a 20% contingency on those numbers.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I can revise that.
20%, certainly that would, yeah.
It just gives us a little cushion.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this, are we planning on any, on the projects, you're doing covered park, are you gonna do covered parking for staff and things like, are we gonna do any kind of solar or anything like that?
As far as the brass tacks of getting into the architectural and engineering, we haven't gone that far. This is just the site concept and the rough numbers. Again, this was kind of all conceptualized at one point,
Yeah.
but then when all of a sudden development came and said, oh, you've got 36 months to move, we started really pinpointing down public works, and then the talks came in that, well, if we're gonna do public works, let's do it all. So again, we're in the process of sending out the architecture for the public works only is going out right now to Jones and Associates. They're also working on the site utility plans through engineering for the entirety of the site. So yes, we are moving forward with that, but have we sat down and pinpointed you know, hey, we're gonna use solar, hey, we're gonna
Yeah.
use,
You're,
we have
you'll
not,
look at it.
we are going to look at it.
Okay, I
Very,
mean,
very
there's just
strong.
some, there's,
Right.
you know, doctor's office over on 1900. They have all the covered parking for their employees and that it's all banked. So, and, you know, I asked the doctor, who I see over there, and he goes, yeah, it cut down the bills a lot. It does. I mean, I have it on my home. I pay $8 a month. That's it. Love it. Yeah. So I think we should look at things like that to see if we can help offset
Very much so.
costs
I wonder
during
if we
the
could
year.
get, not donations, but something to cover that, because we're a city, we've got Rocky Mountain Power.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
there's probably a lot of.
Exactly.
Okay,
There's
as long as-
different grants and,
That's
you
good. I
know,
you guys will get
you know,
into
as far as going energy efficient grants and things like that, we're also very much looking into, I know it kind of shows out greenscape, but we want to do more of a zero-scape with,
that.
Thank
So,
you.
you know, very minimal lawn and water. Again, we are going to be our own irrigation company on this project, but we're trying to make it also be a feasible way that we can provide water to the Ben Lomond commercial and HHI if they decide to come on board, and some other residents in that area that would like to get on pressurized.
And I think this is a great opportunity to lead out in being conservative. I mean, they said today, we're getting another, you know, we're gonna get hit with another emergency, you know, water problems and everything.
And again, water is a valuable resource, right? And even if we have the next 2 or 3 years that are super heavy wet years, are we really looking at all the growth and all the extra water use that is coming with the growth, right? So no matter if we're out of a drought, we still need to conserve as much as possible and be as water wise as
I
possible.
get that question all the time. All the time, people will come and go, where's the water? It's not my job. No.
But that is the main question. And it's asked by every water company, every water district,
Every
I mean,
person.
every person. We just asked Bona Vista the other day, where, and Matt also, where's this extra water? Well, we've got to drill a couple more wells, which wells are great, and we have underground water. But the problem is the electrical costs to get the water up. So again, the residents end up paying that higher water rate.
Yeah.
So again, water is a very tough, fickle matter, especially right now. But we want to just be as water wise and conservative and very much energy efficient as possible.
You said Justin will be on our own water company, will be part of 4 Mile
Yes.
Water District. Okay,
Yes.
this is part of that.
Yeah.
Okay, I just,
I should break that up because we have to break that up as far as council and board members. But yes, we will be on the 4 Mile Special Service District. We have the water shares out of the Western Canal to do our property. When HHI and others come on board, they'll have to not only pay, like I said, a substantial connection fee because of all the infrastructure we're putting in, but then also have to pledge their water shares
Okay.
to then get pressurized irrigation.
That answer your questions then?
Yes, thank you. I think we have clear direction.
yeah, got my little arrows up here.
Dog Grove's got some.
Got one. Long past like that in 25 years, and this is all over. We have future ability to expand and grow substantially. You know, green space, things that we have to do as we need to develop and, you know, and grow within our public works access.
So Jim, if you want to pull back up the concept. So the front half of the public works, well, not about the first third will be the office space.
I can't see your finger.
Oh, sorry. So maybe about the.
About the blue dot.
Here, I'll-
Yeah, the blue dot, the 13th.
There's
That will be the office space, but we're doing a 2-tier system, a 2-story system. that the bottom half will just be the offices for now. The top will just be a mezzanine that's already pre-plumbed, pre-wired to just throw up walls with expansion for more office, more people, growth. The building itself is twice as big, if not a little more, than our current building,
So let me clarify
with
this a
the
little bit.
outbuildings being plenty.
And I know that you're planning all that in here, and that's great. And also, the land that gobbles up, you know, and parcels of land that belong to the city here and there that we need or sell or whatever. As we look futuristically, making sure we have something if we have to. We have to do it at a park someplace, things like that. I realize developers are doing it, but they're also, you know, taking that land and maximizing the health. I guess I'm just saying, looking down the road, let's make sure we have a piece of the pie for our grandchildren.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I mean, what are we at right now? 17 with Craig North, and then I'm trying to think, is it 20?
11.
11
We're on
over on behind the public works that are, so right now 30 acres is getting given to the city for park area.
And there's some areas within the golf course.
Within that will be park areas, yeah. And
I think what's going on is great.
right,
I'm looking
right,
down.
exactly. But the nice thing about the 11 acres and the 17 acres will very much be deeded to the city. Again, we'll keep them in open space and possibly have a chance maybe later down the road that those could be
That's
turned
all
into
no, we're looking,
facilities if we need.
yeah, because there will be needs down the road.
Yes.
And we're in a similar situation, potential exists with the city hall, where the rec center is typically a very tall building. We could build an upper level to the city hall to accommodate additional growth if that were necessary.
It's not a 30-foot tall building.
Sure, it's the rec, but I don't know what the standard height is for a rec center, but it would probably accommodate a 2-story office space. is what
I
we're
would say
anticipating.
minimum 25 to 30 foot. Again, that is not fronting 750. That is tucked back. To-
Oh, I see.
You know where I'm going with
Yes.
this.
Exactly. So that will be tucked back a ways and not be the first thing you see BDO right off the lip.
So are there any questions that we don't have answers for that you'd like staff to find for you before we move forward and put this back on the agenda in May for actual decision? It'll be a good budget meeting in May.
I just want to clarify. that Our general obligation bond, if we go that route, that's got to go on the November ballot. And we have to do that by
June, I think is what he
sometime
told
in
me.
June.
Yeah, he'll send us a timetable of what deadlines we have to meet if we're gonna put that on a ballot. We are going through our own budget, so we have put in some money into an election budget if we do decide we want to go this route. We've tried to plan accordingly. But we'll get those, I'll get those numbers and date deadlines for you at the next meeting. And we'll put this back on for a discussion action item.
Thank you, guys. That becomes a lot of information to process, a lot of things that we needed to come together to understand. So thank you, staff. Thank you all.
I think we'll get the meat of it done. That's important. I mean,
So this could be
to give you guys the offices.
Yeah.
Station. Taken care of, I think this is something we have to do. The other stuff, yeah. we'll try to pitch it.
all right.
Thank
Have
you.
your answers?
Yes.
Justin, how big is that parcel?
15 acres. Yeah.
Technically, there's 2 parcels.
There-
that
yeah.
combine.
suggest I have.
Oh, so let's go.
No, you can't.
You don't have to stay, I just want to ask you. I see you knocking buildings down. That's wonderful.
Of course.
But you know what I'm still not real. Yes, because I'm getting heat.
The trees?
No.
Oh.
The park. When is the playground? If you put up, when is
The
it?
playground is an issue on every single playground in the city.
I know, but I can, and they all said, you guys said it was. gonna be done."
We are looking at the last tentative I got that the site plan, and Matt and I have discussed this and Jenny. The site plan is supposed to come through this next month through our planning commission. As soon as that's done, again, we're right there at that funny phase of where the developer's agreement and the engineering now all have to fall into place.
That's all.
And that's where we're at.
So I can
so
use
I'm
that
hoping-
when they ask me.
I'm very optimistic that the site plan comes through here in the next couple of weeks. We can review it to be on the next planning commission in May, is what they expressed to me. And this was as of a week and a half ago.
All right, well,
good to
we're
know.
not a formal meeting, so I don't know if you need a motion to adjourn, but I
We
think
did
we're done.
motion to open.
So,
So our next council meeting is on the 10th, right?
correct. Got it for sure.
That'll be budget stuff.
That one ends in June.
It'll be the tentative budget.
And when is June's gonna be when?
The 14th,
Yes.
what I have,
14.
like that. My birthday. Is it your birthday? It's a full moon, you can owl.
All right, well, thank you.
The 15th, you
Good,
said,
that's
or
good.
14th?
Brody, thank you
14th
for
of June.
coming. Nice to